God raised Jesus, the author of life, from the dead. Of this, we are witnesses. Howard Carter was a British archaeologist that lived in the 20th century, and his claim to fame is that on November 26, 1922, after years of searching, he discovered King Tut's tomb. And what he found in the tomb was amazing. Gold, silver, jewelry, clothing, furniture, a chariot, weapons, rooms filled with stuff, even a throne. What else did Mr. Carter find in King Tut's tomb? Anybody? King Tut, of course, he was still there. He found King Tut. 2 weeks ago, we celebrated Easter Sunday, another king's tomb, and that tomb was empty. And as incredible as an empty tomb is, it is a huge leap of faith to go from an empty tomb to the resurrection of Jesus. And God understands that. He understands our fears and our doubts. And He doesn't ask us to leap off a cliff. Imagine Howard Carter discovering King Tut's tomb, no body, no Tut. What would everybody think immediately? Someone stole the corpse, of course. One of the things I love about our Catholic faith, and Father Dave mentioned it at the beginning of Mass, is we know how to celebrate. My daughter loves to celebrate her birthday month. But we celebrate Easter for 50 days, from Resurrection Sunday to Pentecost. And we celebrate Jesus' ascension 40 days after his resurrection. And between his resurrection and ascension, numerous appearances of Jesus are documented in the Gospels and in the Acts of the Apostles. And we hear of 3 of those appearances in today's reading from Luke alone. 2 disciples encounter Jesus on the road to Emmaus. And today's Gospel reading picks up the story when they're in a hurry. They're hightailing it back to Jerusalem from that encounter to share that news with the rest of his disciples. And they bust into that room where the rest of the disciples are holed up, and there is excitement and electricity already in the air, because they're talking about Jesus' appearance to Peter. And then the 2 start to share their story. And in the middle of that, Jesus appears to all of them, to the entire group. Jesus makes a number of appearances over those 40 days. Easter Sunday, Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene and the women who came to Jesus' tomb. Jesus appeared to Peter, then to the 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus. And as we heard last week, he appeared to the disciples when Thomas was absent. And then he came back and appeared to them again, and Thomas was present. And he appeared again to the 7 disciples that were on the Sea of Galilee. And he appeared to 500 people at one time. As I was praying and meditating and preparing for this weekend, I was reading the scriptures, and I was amazed at the reaction of the disciples on hearing these reports. Mary Magdalene runs from the tomb to report to the disciples, and they don't believe her. In Mark's gospel, the 2 on the road to Emmaus report to the others who don't believe them. And when the women who went to the tomb on Sunday morning to properly prepare Jesus' body report back to the disciples with excitement, and I quote from Luke's gospel, their story seemed like nonsense, and they didn't believe them. Thomas refused to believe, as we heard last week. And Matthew's gospel ends in chapter 28, the Great Commission. And just before Jesus ascends to heaven, he meets his disciples on the mountain. They saw him, worshiped him, but they doubted. What's Jesus' approach to the disciples in the midst of their fear and their bewilderment? Listen to his approach from today's gospel reading from Luke. He's very patient with them. First, he says to them, "Peace be with you." He greets them in a very familiar way. They've heard these words from him before. These are familiar words from a familiar voice. And then he reminds them. He says, "These are the things I've told you in the past." It's like, remember? I said these things. It's me. We talked about this. Touch me. A ghost doesn't have flesh and bones like I do. Come and eat with me. I'm hungry. Give me a piece of fish. And then he just says, it's really me. In last week's gospel, Thomas said he would never believe unless he could touch the wounds. And what does Jesus do? He invites him. He said, "Thomas, come. Touch my hands. Feel the nail marks. Put your hand here. Believe." God, in his infinite patience and understanding, he doesn't ask us to take a leap of faith, pinning our hope on an empty tomb alone. No, our God doesn't do that. God verifies the empty tomb. God puts an exclamation point on the empty tomb by the many appearances of Jesus after his resurrection. And then he asks us to take a small step of faith. That faith journey, a step, I think one step and another, it reminds me of a game I used to play with my kids when they were young. I mean, like 2, 3 years old. My wife hated it. Jeannie hated this game. But we had a staircase going up to the bedroom, and I would put the little guy, about 2 years old, I'd put him on like the first or second step, I'd say, and I'd get real close. My hands would be about 2 inches from their armpits, and I would go, "Jump. It's okay. Daddy will catch you." And we'd do that, and they'd giggle, they'd close their eyes, and they'd jump. And they'd laugh and gain some confidence. We'd do that a few times, and I'd put them up another step. They'd fling themselves off. Wasn't that big of a leap. But by the 5th step, it was a pretty good jump. I never dropped them. Jeannie, I never dropped them. I had 2 choices, really. I can put my faith, my trust in something or in someone. I can put my faith in a cold, dark, unconnected, unconcerned energy force out there in the universe that somehow birthed life by accident. That you and I live and die without ultimate purpose or meaning, and their lives are accidents, pure chance. Or I can put my faith in Jesus. I can put my faith in the beauty of the empty tomb. I can put my faith in Jesus, who proclaims the Father's love for us by taking on our flesh. The beauty of a God who is not distant, aloof, unconcerned, and disconnected. But he's so passionate about you and I, you and me, that he came and dwelt among us. The beauty of a God who comes to share our life and shares his very divine life with you and I in the greatest exchange in history. The idea of not just eternal life, but the promise of new life lived eternally. That, brothers and sisters, is just crazy enough for me. It's crazy enough to excite me. I mean, living with myself for all eternity? Ask my family. I don't think they'll tell you that's heaven. But the idea of living a life that God longs for me to live, that from all eternity God's idea and plan for me is becoming a reality, that is a beautiful thought, and that appeals to me. Pope Francis' apostolic exhortation, The Call of Holiness in Today's World, was just published, and I share just 2 quotes from that document that I think capture the idea that God's plan for our lives is exciting and beautiful. In his opening paragraph, the Holy Father said this: "The Lord asks everything of us, and in return he offers us true life, the happiness for which we were created. He wants us to be saints and not to settle for a bland and mediocre existence." In paragraph 32, he said, "Don't be afraid of holiness. It will take away none of your energy, vitality, or joy. On the contrary, you will become what the Father had in mind when he created you, and you will be faithful to your deepest self." You will be faithful to your deepest self. No more masks, no more hypocrisy, no more conflicted living. Faithful to my deepest self, free to live a transparent life. I want that. That's exciting to me. We all exercise faith, putting our trust in something or someone. Atheist or Christian, make no mistake, whatever side of the fence you come down on requires an act of faith. The first option, disconnected energy force, life is an accident, without eternal purpose and meaning, that doesn't even seem worthy of our humanity. But in the words of 20th century philosopher and mystic Miguel Unamuno, I'm not saying we merit an afterlife or that logic even demonstrates it to us. I'm saying that we need it. Whether we deserve it or not, that's all. I'm saying that what passes away does not satisfy me, that I thirst for eternity. And thanks be to God that the crazy, beautiful, good news is that God raised Jesus from the dead. And he wants to do that for you and for me. So take a small, beautiful, crazy step. He will catch you. The tomb is empty. Jesus is risen. He's risen indeed.